Julius puts up a three. And a goal!
Bearcat Blitz in the middle of the holiday season right here on the Believe Network. I'm your host, Russ Heltman of Cincinnati Bearcats on SI. He's my co-host across the way there, Neil Meyer of Cincinnati rival Cincinnati site, I should say, the frontofficenews.com. No games this week at all for Cincinnati Bearcats football or basketball. The first time we've said that in like 3 or 4 months, essentially. Or actually, 2 to 3 months, because there was a bye week mixed in for football, which didn't involve any basketball. But a lot of time to assess what happened in the non-conference and some time continuing for the transfer portal happenings in the football ranks. Not a lot of action over the last few days as the Bearcats continue trying to nail down some of their most needed spots left on the roster. We're going to start the show with that to close out the week on Bearcat Blitz, and then we'll get into the Kansas State preview. Monday night action in Manhattan on the road in the beginning of Big 12 play for Cincinnati. Then I believe they welcome Arizona back to town in the second half of the opening week of games in the Big 12 2024-25 conference slate. Cannot wait for it. It's going to be a lot of fun, going to be a whirlwind next few months in a conference slate that looks a lot more kind of contenderish for the Bearcats when we think about them maybe competing for a Big 12 regular season title. That was kind of a long shot going into the season, but I could see them maybe mixing into it. We'll maybe discuss that a little bit in the preview portion of things in the back half of the show. And yes, they do have Arizona on January 4th for the Big 12 home opener. Before we get to all that, though, I want to tell you about Bet Online. Bet Online is a wonderful presenting sponsor of the show, and they continue to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, Bet Online provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen, with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, and college basketball, NHL to UFC. Head to Bet Online today, and don't forget to use promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. Get to a quick break, and then we'll start up our look at the transfer portal, the latest on that front from the football side of things, right here on Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online. Neil, transfer portal, not a whole lot happening in the third week of action available to the Bearcats. It is shutting down for undergraduates on December 28th. So as of this recording, a little bit less than 24 hours for the undergrads to get into the portal. Once you're in the portal, though, it doesn't shut down tomorrow. You don't have to make a decision by tomorrow. You just have to be in the actual portal by tomorrow. And Neil, running down the list of additions so far, you got Caleb Goody, Noah Jennings, Cyrus Allen, Jeff Caldwell, Noah Latalipe, Tarantayo, Jalen White-McLean, Matthew McDoom, and Steven Rusnick, the kicker addition. That, by my calculations, is 9 transfer portal additions. And even though we haven't heard or seen a commitment this week, probably still expecting 5, maybe 6 more additions, given the postseason comments we heard from Zach Grant and Scott Satterfield and how they wanted to approach this time.
Yeah, no, most certainly, Russ. Obviously, what we heard from Zach Grant and Scott Satterfield sounded like they were looking at maybe that 13 to 15 range in terms of transfer portal additions. But it's also worth noting too, Russ, like you just mentioned, that the portal might close for tomorrow, but it only closes for a week. It'll open back up the first week of the new year. That just essentially says, hey, you can't go on visits during this week. They want that holiday week to be closed, spend time, family, whatever it might be. And then the portal reopens back up the first week of January, because for those who remember and followed this last season, this final week right here, Joe Royer was already on campus at Cincinnati. Then this then he closed that week closed. But he visited Tennessee the first week of January last year. I believe January 5th it was, before making his decision to Cincinnati. So overall, it's just a little, I wouldn't say window closed. It's just a week where you can't do any visits. If you're already in there, you kind of got a week to figure out your options. But overall for Cincinnati, that could be a good thing. I mean, we see a couple offers going out there right now over the recent days and the holidays. But on top of it, Russ, it's kind of been a quiet, quiet week and a half for Cincinnati after the 3 editions last week. But overall, you got to expect a couple more guys. I mean, people are still entering the portal as we speak. Bowl games are still being played. So overall, expect Cincinnati to be up there at that 13 to 15 range in terms of transfer portal additions. But it's going to be a fun few weeks, to say the least, especially with all these bowl games going on and how players kind of take that situation. Could they get some extra game tape out there for the portal? It's interesting, especially when each coach has different opinions on it. I mean, Kenny Dillingham is letting his guys who played in the transfer portal still go out there and get game tape and be a part of the college football playoff run. So every coach does things differently, but it's going to be interesting over the next few weeks.
And when we kind of look at the latest happenings, they did offer an edge rusher on Thursday, or popped up edge rusher out of Oregon, who would immediately Amarion Winston. He would immediately be their best edge rusher if you were to pick the Bearcats. He 2 years of eligibility, has offers from Baylor, Kansas, Arizona State. Not a ton of production, in a little bit less than 500 total snaps over the last 2 years at Oregon, but has the measurables, and I think has the pedigree to probably come in and immediately make an impact for Cincinnati in a room that right now, Neil, I would say edge rusher is the most pressing need. Micah Coleman coming off of a torn Achilles. I don't know how much you can expect from him, and I don't know how fair it is to expect a ton from him in his first few games, first year back from that injury. Rob Jackson was flat out bad last year in his first time with extended snaps at Cincinnati. 179 pass rush snaps. He totaled just 9 pressures. Not even close to good enough. That has to be way better if he wants to be a major part of this rotation and be an impactful part of this rotation in 2025. 52.6 overall PFF grade. He had 1 game graded above 70 overall, and it was a 70.3 outing against Iowa State. That included no pressures, and he played 364 total snaps. He has to be way better to be an impactful part of this rotation. And then outside of those 2 guys, Neil, it's Jalen White-McClain and Marquez Parker. There's a serious need at edge.
Yeah, no, most definitely. A big position of need for Cincinnati is that edge rusher position, because like you mentioned, Russ, you don't fully know what to expect from Micah Coleman. Obviously, he was a guy that
best case scenario, he's as impactful or more impactful than he was at EMU, but you can't expect that.
You can't expect that coming off the injury. But you look down at Coleman, he does provide all the measurables. 6'4", 265 pounds. He provides all the measurables. And Russ, for those who weren't listening to the show back in the spring, he was off to a fantastic spring camp and was slotted to be that guy on the edge. So it was going to be really interesting to see what could have been there for Cincinnati at the edge position if he didn't get injured. But on top of it, Russ, you mentioned it. That's going to be the position I need, because you're going to need depth, especially at that position. Because you look on top of it, you have Jalen White-McClain, you have Micah Coleman. It's going to be Marquez Parker, Rob Jackson. It's going to be interesting to see what Cincinnati really looks to add there on top of it from the edge position. But I would expect them to go after one more edge, to say the least, maybe even 2. You get 1 or 2
as evidenced by them offering that Oregon guy right there.
Yeah, if 1 or 2 more edge pieces, because the thing that Cincinnati needs, and we saw it last year at that position, is depth. Cincinnati was forced to play guys like Marquez Parker, Rob Jackson, a lot of true freshmen early on. I mean, that experience is great and all, but your depth is battle tested, and especially in a run-heavy league in the Big 12, you're going to need a plethora of guys to rotate in and out on the defensive line when every running back is an NFL running back, essentially.
Yeah, Neil, the kind of timeline we've seen them be static here and not adding any commitments has seen them fall down the transfer portal rankings. They've gone from a top 20 class on 24/7 Sports to now down to 42nd overall. Don't believe 24/7 Sports has Noah Jennings commitment factored in. As of this recording, they have them still sitting at 8 commits overall. So it'd probably be more like probably in the 35-ish range. in that scenario when they add that 9th commit on the board there. So I think that's right where you want to see them be, kind of right in the 30s to 40s nationally in the transfer portal, adding talent solidly in that sense, and then hopefully developing some of the diamonds in the rough out of a underwhelming recruiting class that is just kind of is what it is at this point in the NIL structure and the NIL landscape of college football. The static nature and the non-additions over the past week, though, have seen them fall down the transfer portal rankings, although still a very solid class, in my opinion, and a class that has addressed a lot of issues so far. One more note, Neil, safety as well. Safety, not a ton of depth behind Logan Wilson, Trey Gola-Collard, and we're seeing that kind of get acknowledged by the staff in a continued interest with New Mexico State transfer Taden Barnes. He is apparently taking a transfer visit next week to Cincinnati. He has offers from Houston, Texas State, and others on the board right now. So that's another name to keep an eye on in Taden Barnes. But any other transfer portal nuggets or notes you want to close out with, Neil, before we get to football or before we get to basketball?
No, yeah, I think we hit the nail on the head. Those are the two names that we have seen come out and say they would be visiting Cincinnati. Well, I don't know if Marion Wilson will be visiting, but got offers from Cincinnati. Let me rephrase that. But overall, it's going to be interesting to see what really happens over the next few weeks. Obviously, those are the two positions of need for Cincinnati, especially after you see your secondary completely overhauled just again for what seems to be the second or third straight year. And then on top of it, staying active. I mean, it's a gauntlet to accomplish in the NIL landscape, especially with all these schools. Until the salary cap or some restrictions come out, you're going to see NIL take over the transfer portal, which is going to be interesting. But definitely look forward to keeping an eye on this one because I know it's going to gear up for Cincinnati. Yeah,
falling down the ranks, but like we said, it is what it is. You do the best you can, and you try to maximize the resources the best you can. I think this UC football program in general is doing that as best it can in this ever-changing NIL landscape. Very interesting to see what happens over the next few days and few weeks. As we mentioned, they're still likely to add, I would guess, 4, 5, maybe 6 more players from the transfer portal. Keep addressing those issues. In terms of guys that transferred out, Neil, close on this. Recently, really only of the transfers out from this program, I'll go ahead and pull it up in terms of the total transfers that they've had so far. 9 outgoing transfers have been logged on 24/7 Sports, and no one's really transferred up out of that group. Jordan Young, you could say maybe a transfer up going from the Big 12 to the SEC in Arkansas. But, I mean, Neil, I would say Arkansas is a pretty comparable program to Cincinnati right now. They're not like blowing Cincinnati out of the water in terms of wins and losses and what they've accomplished over the past few years compared to what UC's done. So it's another cycle where Cincinnati is seemingly not losing a ton of talent to bigger schools. It's really just been Jordan Young that's, if you can make a case for it, has transferred up away from Cincinnati.
Yeah, and I think that's the only notable one. Now, Sterling Burkhalter is getting a lot of interest. Obviously, I think he's going to wait until after the new year to kind of figure out what he's wanting. He's picking up some ACC offers, some Big 10 offer or Big 12 offers, AAC offers. He's visiting a couple schools. I know he visited Kansas last week. So overall, he's getting a lot of good looks, but I think he's the guy that's got the most offers outside of Jordan Young. And I mean, 6'4", big time playmaker. I thought he could have had a big role for this team this season, but unfortunately he hit the transfer portal. So overall, I think he could be another guy that could maybe find his way up, but not in the caliber of Cincinnati essentially, but wouldn't be far off. But Jordan Young to the SEC to Arkansas, I think that's a slight comparison to Cincinnati, but Arkansas has been so hit or miss over the last 2 years. It's going to be interesting to see what really happens out there. But Jordan Young could go out there and find his way as a starting cornerback. But with 1 year left of eligibility, it's either hit or miss out there in Fayetteville.
No doubt about that. And 9 logged on 24/7 Sports, but there's about 16 total transfers. And as of this recording, I believe 6 have found homes.
And I think it's worth noting too, Russ, on that aspect. Brady Drogosh transferred to Grand Valley State. Look for him to play the quarterback position down there.
Yeah, he's not playing linebacker at Grand Valley State.
He made that move to simply play quarterback.
Right. You got Aaron Turner going to Rice. Jordan Young, as we mentioned, going to Arkansas. Tyron Smith with his, I think it's his
He
third
went to
Texas team
State. Yeah,
going
he
to
went
Texas State. So yeah, not
Which-
necessarily moving up in terms of players
Which the
transferring
Texas
out.
State UC pipeline over the last few years has been low-key kind of crazy because, I mean, you look at it the last 2 years. Drew Donnelly went there 2 years ago. Justin Harris went there last year, and now Tyron Smith goes there. So there's 3 former Bearcats right down there in Texas State uniforms.
We'll get to the basketball uniforms and how they will look in Manhattan, Kansas after these messages on Bearcat Blitz. Ooh, Neil. We're nearly there to the first Big 12 action of the season for Cincinnati hoops. And before we get to that, Neil, a notable development on the recruiting front, possibly back-to-back years, back-to-back classes of the 5-star sprinkling variety for Wes Miller and the Bearcats. They got it done in 2025 with Sean Abayev and Neil, according to Joe Tipton of On3. They are in the mix fully with 5-star 2026 kind of forward wing talent Talon Kinney. Grew up in the tri-state area, attended Newport High School before taking his talents to Overtime Elite, where he actually played Sean Abayev the weekend the Bearcats were in town facing off against Georgia Tech. 6'2", 160 pounds, 18th nationally and 4th among point guards. So he is a guard. I should go ahead and correct myself there. He makes the UC makes the cut along with Xavier, Kansas, Kentucky, Alabama, and more. He's down to 15 schools overall, some of the top programs in the country. Cincinnati right there in the mix for this talent. Another instance, Neil, where Sean Miller and Wes Miller both going big game hunting with Talon Kinney.
Yeah, Russ, and it's worth noting, too, that Talon Kinney picked up an offer from Cincinnati way before just about many other schools. I mean,
he was not. I wrote that story, Neil. I think it was May of 2023, May of last year. He wasn't ranked on any service back then. UC identified him early.
Yep, and then you look on top of it. I'm looking back at the Rivals highlights right now. He visited UC multiple times, obviously being from Newport, Kentucky, which is right across the river. But he picked up an offer from Cincinnati on October 18th of 2023. So overall, but I mean, Russ, you mentioned it. Talon Kinney is probably one of the most explosive guards in the 2026 class because I mean,
rim rockers.
Because I don't know if you saw the highlight from him yesterday, Russ. I know you're not the big social media guy. He caught an absolute body the other day in Overtime Elite, and this guy was about 3 inches taller than him, and he made that dunk look easy. But I mean, he is a prolific scorer, Russ. Prolific, and I mean, there's a reason why he got recruited to go down to Overtime Elite, to say the least. It puts him on the recruiting map because being from a smaller school in Newport at that early age, dominating, people were like, okay, is he this good or is he just the competition level? But he is going down to overtime. And Russ, he is simply probably arguably the best point guard outside of Jasper Johnson down there in Overtime Elite. It is a big time opportunity for Talon Kinney. But when you look down and you see,
I think he was one of the top picks in the entire circuit when they picked their teams before the season,
which is crazy because if you look down at good point guards, look at that team that he's on, that Rod Wave Elite team. His running mate in the backcourt is Jasper Johnson. So I mean, you have 2 of the top 5 point guards playing together.
I think he's a Kentucky commit too, Jasper, a guy who UC also pursued heavily.
Yeah. So overall, I mean, it is huge for Talon Kinney because you look down at the offers: UK, Georgia, Illinois, Auburn, Oregon, Cincinnati, Notre Dame, Kansas State, Alabama. There's going to be a lot of interest. Kansas, I mean, anytime you see those kind of schools in the mix for a local Cincinnati kid, it's going to be interesting. But if there's one thing Wes Miller has done over recent years, is he has kept the local talent home. I mean, you look at it with Rayvon Griffith. You look at it with Tyler McKinley. He brings C.J. Frederick home. Could Wes Miller get what would this be, his 3rd recruit from the Cincinnati area? Could he be able to land his 2nd 5-star and arguably top player by that time, keep him here in Cincinnati? I mean, it could be something that happens. Obviously, it's still early in the process, but if they are able to get that job done, Russ, I think you're feeling pretty happy for Cincinnati, to say the least, especially now with the whole transfer news and the news of Day Thomas might have an extra year, could get interesting.
Keyshawn Tillery and Taylor Kinney in the backcourt together in 2026. Could be fun. Long way away from that, though. Just the top 15. You got to start getting into the top 5, top 3 range to start really dreaming big about these kinds of talents. But again, another good sign of where the health of this program is. On the middle of an off week on Christmas Day, you get a 5-star dropping you in the top 15. I had a Big 12 play against Kansas State, which we will touch on right now to close out the show. Cincinnati, a 74.1% matchup predictor favorite, Neil, over Kansas State. This might be the biggest matchup predictor favorite I've seen them be in a conference game as a Big 12 member so far. Maybe it was maybe Oklahoma State at home last year. They were up near that 75-ish% range, but in a nip-tuck league like the Big 12, you don't see a favorability metric like that very often. Kansas State just 90th nationally in KenPom, 103rd ranked offense on KenPom, 94th ranked defense, while Cincinnati sits at number 21 nationally in KenPom, 52nd ranked offense, and the 5th best defense in the country. Cannot wait for this one, Neil. Cannot wait for this one. And my big keys offensively starts with a decent defense that you're going up against. Can you find a way to put up 70-plus points for the first time this season against a top 100 KenPom team? They have not done it yet. They failed to do it against Villanova, which was a little striking considering they're 192nd nationally in defense on KenPom with I believe they got the 8th or 7th best offense powered by Eric Dixon. But we know the offense was missing Dan Skillings in that game. So you don't hold them over the fire too much for that result. Real quick, the net rankings in this matchup, Cincinnati up to number 18 in the net now. I believe that's close to a season high, and KSU is last in the Big 12 in the net rankings at 122nd overall. Defense or offensively, though, Neil, 94th ranked defense on KenPom. They're going to be a tough test for this offense, an offense that struggled against good defenses so far this year, that struggled to move the ball well against good defenses. We know how this offense formulates efficiency. Move the ball around, find open looks on the outside, hit those lob threats in the middle, and attack the rim. And they've done a way better job in recent games, Neil, attacking the rim, getting to the free throw line, and making their free throws. I don't know if it's imperative to be over 75% from the free throw line in this game, but they have to be able to attack the rim, move the ball quickly, move the ball fast in transition. KSU is kind of in the top half nationally in pace, so they're going to be able to move the ball quickly up and down the floor in this game. And do not try to kind of make the game too difficult. Get to the rim, get downhill quickly, take advantage of KSU's defensive profile, which is funneling shots to the rim around Coleman Hawkins and their big man defense up front. Coleman Hawkins, team best 96.3 defensive rating, 1.5 blocks per game. That's the best on KSU. I would attack Coleman Hawkins despite that at will. I would force him to make plays as a defender down low, force him to stay out of foul trouble. And then once that opens up on the inside, you can start to attack a three-point defense that is not great. They allow 52nd nationally and allowing 20.2 3-point attempts per game, but they're allowing 34.7% from deep, through 262nd nationally. They do not want to give up a lot of threes because they're not good defending threes. They want to make teams funnel to the inside. I say jump on that strategy, play into that strategy, and then use your great outside shooting to overcome that defense and be able to work it outside and hit guys like Simas Lukosius, Jizzle James, Dan Skillings. Maybe he can make a three amidst his worst three-point shooting season so far of his career right now. That's who I'm looking for, and especially Dan Skillings in this game. His ability to get downhill, his ability to attack the rim is going to be so crucial, and that extra downhill rim attacker could be the big difference in why Cincinnati gets the job done here. What are you looking for when Cincinnati has the ball, Neil?
Yeah, so for when Cincinnati has the ball, I expect them to attack, just like you mentioned. I mean, this is a Kansas State team that, Russ, they have really struggled this year in non-conference. Obviously, when you have a team of nothing but transfers, essentially, you're still trying to find that camaraderie, that togetherness. But on top of it, Russ, they're on a 3-game losing streak to some bad teams. Kansas State is. I mean, you look down, they just got blown out by 20 by Wichita State. You lost to Drake in overtime. St. John's is a good team. They beat them by 17, it looks like. So Kansas State is really in a rut right now, but they have, like Cincinnati, a week off to really prepare for Big 12 play. But everybody knows Big 12 play it's going to be interesting, especially every road being a very good matchup. But for this game, I would love to see Dan Skilling's attack. Like you mentioned, get Coleman Hawkins into foul trouble and make him work on the defensive side of the ball. If Cincinnati gets downhill and attacks Coleman Hawkins, it's going to be an interesting night, to say the least. And if they are able to get him into foul trouble, it could be a very, very easy night for Cincinnati, to say the least. Because guys who don't remember, Kansas State paid Coleman Hawkins up north of $1.3 million in the transfer portal.
Chewed into their depth a little bit with that number.
And he has not really lived up to the expectations on the offensive side of the ball that they saw from a season ago. However, the defensive side, it's easy to say Hawkins is your best defensive player. You get him into some foul trouble there, it's going to be a great sight to see. But Russ, I'm looking down at their roster real quick too. This could be a game where Cincinnati has the height advantage on the inside as well. David Ngunson is a very good player, very experienced player in the Big 12. But outside of that, 6'9", you have Bay Fall, who's 6'11". But outside of that, Coleman Hawkins 6'10". And they have Ugano Onyenso from Kentucky. It's going to be interesting to see how does Cincinnati kind of really prepare that inside out. I'd like to see the lob game get going. But the big thing for Cincinnati is if you get Kansas State into foul trouble, Ngansu, Onyenso, and Coleman Hawkins, it could be a fun night. But Russ, you and I both know, attack Coleman Hawkins. We have heard reports that he's been battling a little knee injury all season long. Attack him. Be quick to him. Don't settle for the three. We saw that versus Xavier. They were kind of settling for some threes. We saw it in some recent games. I would like to see Cincinnati get downhill and attack. Downhill, you get to the rim, you attack. Put some pressure on Kansas State right out the gun by looking to attack. And I think that's where Dylan Mitchell could play a huge role. Day Thomas, Jizzle James, your front court there. I think those could play huge roles. But I would look for Cincinnati to be aggressive early in attack.
Yeah, you see as the athletes to really take advantage and put a ton of pressure on Coleman Hawkins and Ngunson, like you mentioned, on the inside. Aker out in this game is huge. That chews away at their front court depth. They just don't have a lot of front court depth outside of Hawkins. And I'm going to keep pushing. I don't even know if we come close on David Ngusson's name, but that's what we're going to roll with. Averaging 13.6 points, 6.7 rebounds, 1.6 assists. He's going to be a big issue on the other side defensively for Cincinnati. But 6'9", and Nguesson 6'10", and Coleman Hawkins. Outside of that, Neil, there's not a lot of size that they're really going to have to deal with consistently in this rotation. Onyenso has played in just 7 games. He's not been a very, very big factor at 6'11", 225 pounds. Bay Fall has not been a major factor, appeared in just 4 games so far this year. And the other big man they have in Ugana Onyenso has not been a huge factor either. Just 7 appearances this season, averaging 7.4 minutes per game. So if you can get Hawkins in foul trouble, which he's had 3+ fouls in 3 of their 5 losses so far this season, it can open things up tremendously for your offense. Defensively, Neil, as we close out the show here, it's can you weather the kind of top of the key or top of the break, top of the free throw line offensive hub that Coleman Hawkins is going to bring. He's one of the better passers on this team, averaging over 4 assists per game. Him and Doug McDaniel are the top assist man on this team. McDaniel leading with 4.5 assists and Hawkins right behind him at 4.2 assists. They're going to be the ones pinging the ball off of one another, moving around the floor consistently. They move the ball very well in the half court, averaging 17.3 assists per game. That's 34th nationally. They will dice you up defensively. Your defense, if you are not on point with your rotations and not on point with your ball screen defense. Good thing Cincinnati does not have any issues with that at all, Neil, with the top 5 defense in the country, one of the best field goal percentage defenses in the entire nation. I'm not worried about them in this game. Maybe David Nguesson gives them some problems, as one of the most efficient players in the country. He's third nationally with a 69.2% effective field goal rate this season at 6'9", 205 pounds, just monstrous on the inside, shooting 72.2% from 2-point range in 2024, 2025 so far. But I just think UC's way better on the inside. They got way better defenders in terms of the comparable offensive talent from Kansas State. And I just don't see how, with another week to continue gelling, a full scouting report time to take advantage of with this Kansas State matchup, how they're not going to be able to shut them down on the inside. I mean, Neil, they're giving up 42.3% shooting inside the arc. Cincinnati is this season, 7th best nationally, and they're giving up 27.5% 3-point mark nationally, or 27.5% 3-point mark. That's 10th best nationally in the entire country. 8th best overall field goal percentage defense, 37.5% on the year. I think they've held like 4 or 5 opponents to under 38% from the field. Yeah, 3 straight opponents under 38% from the field, or excuse me, under 40% from the field. So I see that continuing again here, and I got the Bearcats winning this game pretty handedly, 78-69. What do you got defensively? I think you're muted there, Neil.
Oh, yeah. 78-70 in favor of the Bearcats. Sorry about that.
Wow, we were almost the same score. That's hilarious.
I swear it's like every show we're close. Every show we're close.
Maybe that means we're just good analysts, and good analysis means you're pretty close on the score line. Any defensive nuggets you got, Neil, before we get out of here?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a game where Day Thomas could really have a good impact on the game defensively. We saw him come alive over the last few games, but Doug McDaniel versus Day Thomas or Jizzle James, I think that's going to be a pretty fun matchup to watch on Monday night as well.
It's here, Neil. Big 12 play.
Big 12 play is here, baby.
Man, I can't wait to be with you in that arena next weekend for the Arizona State matchup. This is my favorite 2-month stretch of the entire year by far. Can't wait to get the new year cooking, and cannot wait to get Big 12 play cooking in basketball. My favorite sport, my favorite time to cover it. We're here, people. Let's see what the Bearcats can do in Big 12 action over the next couple of months. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Eltman. This has been Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a 3.